Hey, you are now listening to the Graceway Podcast. Let's talk.
Hey everybody, welcome to Let's Talk. My name is Jeff Adams, and this is a time when Pastor Tim Dunn and I just talk about what he has just shared with us on Sunday morning. So we're happy to invite you into the room. And Pastor Tim, you've got a friend here today. Why don't you introduce Nick?
Yeah, this is Pastor Nick Nye. Nick and I have known each other. We were talking on Friday for maybe 15 years. I was in Cincinnati. He was in Columbus. Planted a great church in Columbus, Short North neighborhood called Veritas that God blessed. Transitioned from there, went to New York City, and is now back in his hometown, Columbus, leading some citywide ministry stuff and praying about planning another church. And so he and I have stayed in touch, but kind of reconnected around our vision to help good leaders plant healthy, reproducing churches. And so he came in for us to talk through kind of his vision and whether or not Graceway would be able to be a part of planning that church. So
your heart is all about church planning,
Sure.
and I want to make a connection there with what you spoke about this morning.
Yeah, sure.
You were in this series on how to. We talked about how to fix a bad marriage, how to do this, how to do that. Today was all about how to evangelize, how to share our faith, whatever word that you want to use for that. And it was great, by the way. But with Nick here, it just occurred to me as you're introducing him, like, this is a church-wide thing.
Yeah.
You're not concerned about just building a bunch of people in the box. Share your heart a little bit about that. What do you see in terms of sharing the good news with the greater world?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have talked about this. I think you want to make disciples, and when you're making disciples, churches get planted that want to make disciples. That there's this sequencing in the kingdom that works that way, and so today was really about trying to stoke the flame of our concern for the lost,
right?
And trying to align ourselves with how God says to not only care for but communicate with the lost, and feeling like, especially in the West, we have systematized that to the point of, it sounds like a sales pitch, almost. But any study will tell you that the most effective churches to reach lost people are church plants.
Right.
Churches our size and age are typically, now by God's grace, this won't be true about us, but are typically less effective at reaching younger generations, less effective at reaching people far from God. And so not only do we always want to have our hearts be near to God's heart for the lost, as our church, we want to invest in church plants and mission partners and good leaders who are starting new things, and trust that God will bring people into the family through that as well.
So Nick, as you sat here this morning and listened to your friend speak, you as a church planner, you've done this at least a couple of times now. You have to understand how to effectively share your faith in order to plant a church. They don't just come.
Right.
You build it, they don't come.
Right.
And so as you heard him speak this morning, what is a salient point or two that stuck out in your mind and you're like, yeah?
Yeah, especially when it comes to the church planting aspect. There's a desperation when you're planting because there's nobody in your church. There's not a lot of things to lean on that we traditionally lean on in the Western church, of like just inviting somebody to church because there is no church, or the church is usually pretty awkward. There's only a few people, so it's not there's not a lot to do. And then I think one of the things that Pastor Tim said was we're trying to get all of us to remember, like, we are ambassadors. We are in these spheres of our work, and we're going to be able to reach those people better than anybody can because you're there, you're present, you have the relationship. And I think trying to get us to not lean on the crutch of just inviting somebody to church, which is a good thing, but just leaning on that crutch and trying to get them outside of that, wake up, be desperate, like we gotta really engage our neighbors and our friends. I think that's one of the big points I heard coming out of that.
Wow. One of the things that you said, Pastor Tim, that I thought was perhaps among the most profound things you said is that sharing our faith is about farming. It's not about sales.
Yeah.
And you just kind of passed by in your opening comments that one of the things that we've done in the church is we've not been very wise, very good about sharing our faith. And Nick, you alluded to that as well, that we have to be wise. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Evangelism is not farming or not sales, it's farming?
Yeah, I just think we've made it very transactional. And I think that a lot of times the evangelist is as concerned for themselves as they are the person they're evangelizing, right? Because the effectiveness of our spiel gets tied into our identity. So, I said the thing, they didn't do the deed, I must have done it wrong. And
That's good.
And I think what it does is it individualizes evangelism. I didn't do it right, versus a communal expression of God's people all committed to their part of mission.
Right.
So the farming piece has multiple pieces, multiple tools, multiple workers, multiple seasons. There's a longevity to it. There's persistence and resilience in it. It's not, I just showed up on harvest day, so therefore I'm a good farmer. No, a good farmer, sees the field when there's nothing there, invests in the field when there's nothing there, tends to it, cares for it, all of those things. And I think that's closer to, and we say this a lot of different ways, like relational evangelism, holistic evangelism, all that. But it's really just biblical evangelism, and we have turned it into this, it didn't work if they didn't pray a prayer. And now we have people running around who prayed a prayer but aren't any more followers of Jesus than before they prayed the prayer.
And then what do? It's really messed up.
And then I feel like I must not have done it right, and they're not actually. It's all. So I feel like we need a more communal vision. Mm-hmm. We need a slower vision. We need all hands on deck. Your gift matters. We need some more resiliency. And I also tried to say at the end of the day, it not working, it was never up to you. Yeah. God saves people. Mm-hmm. You don't save people. Right. And if you gave them the spiel and it didn't work, it doesn't mean you didn't do it right. It might just mean you're the seed. You're not the harvester, kind of thing. And so that we talk almost every week about how individualistic, how transactional, how consumeristic we've made our faith.
Yeah, and I love when you were working the farming aspect of that. Farming is about time.
Yeah.
It's about nurturing. It's about watering and fertilizing.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the era. You came on, obviously, a couple of decades after me. But I can remember in early days of my faith going to classes and reading books that were nothing more than sales manuals.
Right.
And they were about closing the deal.
Yeah.
They were not about nurturing someone and sowing seed.
Right.
And then having the patience to wait for that seed to come up.
Yeah. And I a lot of times when I think about evangelism, Nick's church is a great example of this, because there's different kind of farmers in different kind of places, right? And Nick was in a really kind of intensely liberal community and had to learn how to farm that specific kind of field.
Yeah.
And we have turned it into like, this is the one way to evangelize. And when it doesn't work in a certain field, we say, oh, it's just a hard field, not we're bad farmers, right?
Yeah.
And so Nick would have been planted an amazing church, saw a lot of fruit in a very hard field, because he took the time, he invested in the relationships. I mean, I'd be interested just in your perspective on how you went about doing that. But I mean, an amazing church full of, liberals and hippies and hipsters and, the younger generation that everyone, all the old folks are saying they don't care about faith anymore, they're post-Christian. And it's not true. We just have to learn how to farm differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
What do you say to that, Nick? What short executive summary? How do you reach a hipster or whatever?
How do you reach a hipster?
That's my next book.
That's your
Good.
Funny you should say. Yeah.
I mean, we're all relational beings.
Yeah.
Like as we've been saying, like we're all designed to have relationship and connection, and people can smell you when you're coming there to not be relational, but you're there to get something out of them, even if it's like a good thing for them of meeting Christ.
Yeah.
But for me, a lot of it was just really spending the time cultivating the soil and the relationships. So I knew every single business owner down our main drag. I was always present at neighborhood meetings, just being around, getting to know neighbors, investing in the relationship. That where it all came. So none of those people came to Christ or came to our church or any of that, but they were always like, hey, I know those people are here.
Yeah.
They love us. They're with us, and that was always the fragrance that was given off, which is what the church should be giving
It wasn't an us versus them type of thing. You became part of the community. And you were talking about that this morning,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
1 Corinthians 9, where
Yeah.
you become all things to all people.
Yeah.
That's just good farming.
It's good farming, and it's good, you talk about church planning. We need more and different kinds of churches to reach different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we look at what we call success in the States, and it's typically a certain kind of church. But we really need more and diverse kinds of churches. And we need leaders who want to be in a community and want to be a part of that community. And, oh yeah, I'm planning a church.
Yeah.
And, if you went to Columbus, I know Nick's testimony in Columbus, like the church word, testimony in Columbus. And it really created gospel opportunities for him. Just because he's enjoyable, he's got a great family, all the things we talked about today, and because he was investing in the community for the community's blessing, not only for the sake of planting a church.
Yeah, it just seems to me that we have not done a good job of farming.
Yeah.
And, farmers that have to look at the soil and decide what they're going to plant.
Exactly.
What
Yeah.
type of seeds. Some soil may be rocky, but you can still do things.
Yeah, that's right.
It may be arid, but there's still certain crops that would prosper.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
so.
And it's my father-in-law's a farmer, so this summer I got to go out and bale hay and do all that stuff with him. And it's hard. That's hard work.
Yeah.
And I think that just the fact that it's hard keeps people away, and it scares them a little bit. But we need to make it fun, hard work.
Yeah.
Where it's enjoyable. My father-in-law loves sitting in his tractor. He loves looking at the soil and thinking through that. And we have to be people who love that, even though it's hard work.
It's interesting, but I very rarely meet people who are mad at Jesus.
Yeah, right.
It seems like most people don't want anything to do with Christianity because of the church.
Sure.
And not the church as a concept. That was God's concept.
Yeah,
We're
that's
not
right.
against
It's a
that.
good one, yeah.
But yet the fact that so many Christians, in fact, let me ask you guys a question, because I get this a lot. Somebody who is a sincere believer, they're wanting to share their faith at work, and in their work setting is another professing believer who is, for lack of a better word, bad ambassador. I guess I could say
A
jerk.
jerk.
Jerk, yeah. That's really what I was wanting to say. But how do you deal with something? What counsel would you give for a sincere believer who is not just trying to sow the seed, but trying to clean up an oil spill?
Yeah, I had this conversation after someone came up and asked me after the service, and I said to her, "What does that have to do with you?" And she said, well, he's this and he's that, and I said, right, so you have a daily reminder of what is not an attractive, helpful,
Yeah.
And so you can either commit a lot of time to your lost coworkers, convincing them that you're not that, or you can just do what you should be doing anyways, which is being a good worker, being a good friend, taking the long view. I just think it's all noise, right? It's all noise. And if the enemy knows he can get you out of the field because there's another bad farmer in the field next to you, he's going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a bummer. I hate that is true, but I would just say take the example as a way to clarify your own behavior, your own calling, your own work, your own relationships. And
So let me tie that back to something else you were saying this morning, if I'm hearing you right. You talked about when we do share our faith, we are either sowing seed,
yeah,
or we're coming across somebody that has already been prepared.
Yeah.
And you talked about the fact that when we do that, we have to, sharing our faith is not just showing our faith,
Yeah.
but is actually speaking our faith.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that sometimes in a setting like you just described, this person who approached you, the issue is not feeling like I have to say something now.
Sure.
No, I have to wait for the right time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I guess, in farming, you can't just put the fertilizer out whenever you
Whenever
want to.
you want, yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, no, I mean, and the other side to that is if Nick's father-in-law goes into a field and there's the farmer before left some bad seed in it, or there's weeds in it, well, that's part of your stewardship of that field then.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't, I assume he wouldn't say, if he wants to make a living, he wouldn't say, oh, I don't have to take care of this field because somebody didn't take good care of it before me.
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite. It's more care. I don't know what you would say about that, but yeah, I would say don't be discouraged in doing well, and continue to, build a good testimony and farm a field well. That's what I would say. But how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I did learn this weekend that Pastor Tim is not very good with the farming world.
15 years later, you're fine.
But I always feel like it just comes down to just being that enjoyability part where you're just being smart with people, right? You're not being if you're struggling or you're a coworker struggling with something, you're not just coming in and throwing a Bible verse at. There's this great book called The Patient Ferment of the Early Church, and for that
Called what?
Patient Ferment of the Early Church, and they're making the case that what was so attractive about Christianity, and all these first century writers wrote about patience because they had the church had this patience about them that made that fragrance so attractive that people wanted to be around them, and it was because they were evangelizing. I mean, obviously, the church was spreading like wildfire, but it was like with a patience that was so attractive in that community. And I think that when we're in our workplace doing that, we're not just saying, okay, this is my opportunity to sneak in and get a verse in or something like that, but just like, hey, how's your family? How are you doing? Like, how are you processing? I mean, the greatest question I ask friends in my neighborhood is just, how's your soul?
Yeah.
That's a question that I never really thought about that, but people want to talk about it.
Right. They do. But let me throw one thing out, one more thing I should say, because we're kind of coming to the end of our time. Plus, Pastor Nick has a plane to catch, so we have to respect that. But you were talking this morning also about something that sparked something in me. You had quoted from Ellen White, if I believe. I can't remember the quote, but basically she was saying that God is the master worker, and that the harvest is not up to us.
That's right.
And it reminded me of a tape series that you and I had shared and listened to, where one of the big points was early on that we are the medium. Painters paint with oil, or they paint with chalk, or they paint with watercolor or whatever.
Yeah.
But in this line of sharing the gospel, we are the medium.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I think that a lot of times and I'll just speak confessionally, I have somebody that I want God to save, or I want God to be at work in their life. And I operate in the presumption that I need to gin up some type of compulsion in them toward it. And so I read books on apologetics, or I read books on the religion they grow up in, and whatever. Sure. I have all of this busyness around it. Instead of the belief that I'm supposed to join God's work, not ask God to join my work. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very different temperament. It's a very different set of disciplines around it. Mm-hmm. And when I'm joining God's work, I need to do it in the vein that God is doing it. So sometimes God needs a medium like this or that or these or those. So I'm always in touch with what is best according to how God is working. Mm-hmm. And I'm always, we use phrases like contextualization and all of those big church planting and missions word. Contextualization is basically just what is God doing and what is my appropriate medium response right now. What's the type of church that I should plant? What's the type of conversation that I should have, all of this. And you want flexibility in that because it's not your work, and you want enjoyability in that, right? So, it's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
God saves people, you don't.
Yeah.
But it's really, for me anyways, if you can come make peace with that, the next handful of steps are better than the other.
Anything to add, Pastor Nick?
I just, that enjoyability piece that you brought up, that was the big thing for me, and I think the best way you can be enjoyable is simply just to be listening to people and hear their story and invite them to share their story, and that's, when you're coming and you're saying, you're teaching and you're pushing, or your agenda, or those are, you want to interact, but the enjoyability is really like, this person actually cares, listens, and I think I just really thought that's probably a word for our whole culture, our whole society, Christian society, that we need to really understand. Like we need to be more enjoyable.
Yeah.
I love that, because we have a thing in our church called Growth Track.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have instituted, which I greatly appreciate. And the first step in Growth Track, know God and enjoy Him.
Yeah, right.
And I think the reason that a lot of people are not enjoyable is because they don't enjoy God. They've never learned how.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think there's a big connection. And I love, Pastor Tim, you were talking about the apologetics things, and you said it this morning. There's nothing against apologetics,
No, yeah.
but it's really learning to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
You just got back from working with some of our partners in the Middle East, and I've spent some time there as well. And sometimes people, how would I share the gospel with a Muslim? The same way that you would with a Presbyterian,
That's right.
or the same way that you would with a hipster.
Yeah.
You should learn a little bit about their faith to respect it and their culture. But it's just, how do I become this person's friend and be an enjoyable friend for this person? And God does the rest. We're just the brush in His hand.
That's right. That's right.
Gentlemen, it has been a delight and a joy to have you, Pastor Nick. Hope that we get to see you again someday soon.
Me too.
And I think we're going to have to kind of mail it in, because
good.
we're out of time. So please, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you with us same time, same place next week.
Thanks for tuning into the Graceway Experience. Hope we can talk again sometime.